For more, we are joined now by Kenneth Roth in New York. He is the executive director of Human Rights Watch. Thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Now, you say that the rise of populism poses a profound threat to human rights. Why is that?
Well, what populism essentially is are politicians who claim some special insight into what the majority wants, and then claims that trumps the rights of the minority. They claim that this majoritarian will is sufficient to trample on minorities, immigrants, asylum seekers, refugees, whatever the vulnerable minority is. And that can be popular with a public that is facing serious threats, whether it's economic dislocation caused by globalization and automation, whether it's the cultural change caused by immigration, or even the threat of terrorism. So in today's kind of difficult environment, we see publics that are susceptible to the appeal of the populist. And it's frankly, that is why Human Rights Watch has issued a real call of crisis to the general public to stand up for human rights values, to not fall for the simplistic solutions offered by these populists.
Now, one politician who you mentioned has done that to great success is U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, for example. Some might look at your report and your criticism and say that it is partisan. How would you respond to that critique?
Well, interesting. I mean, just a couple of days before Human Rights Watch issued its annual report, I published a long critique of the Obama administration's 8-year human rights record. We are very much bipartisan critics. We're not the least bit partisan. We hold every government, left or right, Republican or Democrat, what have you, to the same international human rights standards. And indeed, if you look around the world, we are critical of left-wing governments like President Maduro in Venezuela, as well as right-wing governments like Vladimir Putin. So we don't really care about the partisanship. We care about the policies. And what we see is that these populists from a number of different political persuasions are simply jettisoning human rights. They're saying that these are an obstacle to what the majority wants, and we're going to put them aside. But frankly, we've seen how this works. In the past, we saw communism and fascism. These were all about claiming the majority will, justified trumping the rights of a minority. But even today, if you look at, for example, President Erdogan in Turkey, he had tremendous popularity after he suppressed the coup attempt this past July, but he then used that popularity to suppress every conceivable critical voice. And as you mentioned, tens of thousands of people in prison, many just being journalists or dissidents of some sort who have criticized Erdogan. Similarly in Egypt, President Sisi was very popular when he overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood government of President Morsi. But he's then used that popularity to utterly shut down an independent press and independent civil society, any potential to criticize his government. So, this is what happens when you sacrifice the rights of just, an unpopular minority at first. The governments feel that they have license to then gradually go after critics. And before you know it, very few people have any rights at all.
So given that, why do you think that the environment in Europe and the U.S. is so ripe for the success of populist movements like the Brexit campaign, the rise of the far right in France, the election of Trump that you mentioned? Why now? And what is the best antidote?
Well, I think that why now is because there are a series of problems that people feel their governments are not answering. And I just mentioned them. It's the economic dislocation. It's the cultural change from immigration. It's the threat of terrorism. And so, this is a difficult environment. The problem is the populists often don't offer real solutions. Trump talks about undocumented Mexican migrants in the United States, but in fact, their net migration in recent years has been zero. And they take jobs that Americans don't want. Indeed, the American economy is built on their relatively cheap labor. Or if you took, in some of the Europeans who are promoting Islamophobia as an answer to terrorism, you just had Geert Wilders talking in those terms. But of course, the last thing you want to do if you want to fight terrorism effectively is to discriminate against the Muslim community, because they're the ones who are most likely to know at this stage of a potential terrorist plot. The police need their cooperation, which they won't get if official government policy is Islamophobic. So what we need is for the public, for both practical reasons, but also reasons of principle, to stand up to these populists, is to say, these are not the answers to our problems, and these are not the kind of intolerant, hatred-filled societies that we want to live in.
We want to thank you very much for your perspective. Kenneth Roth, the executive director of Human Rights Watch. You have said that human rights is under threat in leading democracies due to the rise of populism, and we very much appreciate your perspective.